welcome to the deep dive. So, you sent us language learning for dummies.pdf, which definitely tells us you're thinking about, maybe tackling a new language. Smart move, actually, to get the lay of the land first.
Definitely. Doing the homework beforehand.
Yeah. So our mission here is basically to pull out the crucial insights from this resource, give you a real head start on understanding what's involved.
Right.
And maybe even, surprise you with some of the benefits.
Exactly. You're doing your research, which is, well, it's often the first sign of someone who's actually going to stick with it.
Good point.
So let's start with maybe the most basic question.
Why?
Why? Why would anyone, embark on this potentially pretty long journey?
Okay, yeah. So the source, it kicks off with expanding your global reach, which makes sense, right?
Yeah.
In our increasingly interconnected world, speaking another language just opens up so many more doors, possibilities for connection.
It really does.
It specifically mentions the growing influence of places like Brazil, Russia, India, China, the BRIC nations, saying that language skills there can be a real asset. Especially, for business.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. Global interactions, commerce, science, even just travel.
Yeah.
Language is, well, it's fundamental.
It's the key, isn't it?
It is. And the source focusing on those emerging economies, that really highlights a very practical advantage today. It's about getting access, access to new markets, new perspectives.
But it's not all about the practical stuff, is it? The source also talks quite a bit about personal enrichment.
Right, the softer side.
Yeah, experiencing a whole new world, as it puts it. It says learning a language really broadens your horizons, helps with self-development.
That's a big one.
And it emphasizes that the effort, the time you put in is genuinely worthwhile on a personal level. It's more than just ordering coffee.
It's about a deeper understanding.
Exactly, a richer understanding of different cultures.
And what's fascinating there, I think, is that language isn't just a tool for communication. It's also like a lens.
A lens. How so?
Well, it shapes how we perceive the world, right? So learning a new one can actually shift your understanding of different cultures, different ways of thinking, pretty fundamentally.
And, okay, this is where it got really interesting for me, the cognitive perks, the brain stuff.
Ah, yes. The brain benefits, always compelling.
Totally. The source points to improved brain activity, even faster reaction times. It links it to increased blood flow and oxygen your brain gets when you're really focused on learning something new.
Which makes sense physiologically.
Yeah. And it even makes this connection to increased wisdom through this kind of mental exercise. I like that idea. Language learning as a brain workout that leads to wisdom.
Well, it's actually more than just a nice analogy. The kind of focused attention and mental agility you need for language learning, that can strengthen what we call executive functions.
Like what?
Things like attention switching, working memory. Imagine constantly translating in your head or figuring out new grammar rules. That's a proper workout for those cognitive muscles.
And it's not just about memorizing lists of words, is it? I mean, the source mentions you're grappling with completely new sentence structures.
Right.
Developing skills in reading, listening, speaking, and writing. It says it's like entering a whole new world each time you switch languages. It forces you into new ways of thinking.
Exactly. It's not just swapping one word for another.
No.
It's a different way of constructing thoughts, organizing ideas. You're engaging with a different kind of logic system sometimes.
How do you mean? Like a different logic?
Well, think about how some languages structure sentences.
Yeah.
Or how they express time or aspect. It can be quite different from English.
Okay, yeah.
And just navigating those differences, that really stretches your cognitive flexibility.
And on a more serious note, the source even touches on the potential for this kind of continuous brain training, through language learning to possibly decrease the risk of senile dementia.
That's a significant potential long-term benefit.
It really is.
It really underscores this idea that keeping your brain active and challenged throughout life is just crucial for cognitive health.
Yeah.
And language learning seems to be a particularly, engaging and effective way to do that.
Right. And then finally, just coming back to the practical side again, the source mentions career advancement.
Ah, yes.
The professional angle.
And maybe increased income potential as your language skills get better. So, I mean, it really seems like there's a whole compelling list of reasons to dive in.
There absolutely is.
But let's be honest, the idea can also feel, pretty challenging, can't it?
Oh, definitely. It's a valid concern for anyone starting out.
So what are some of the key things that make one language, harder to learn than another?
That's a great question. And the source rightly points out that probably the most influential factor is your native language.
Okay. How so?
Well, languages that share similarities with your own, maybe in sentence structure or pronunciation, they'll generally feel a bit more intuitive, easier to grasp initially. Right, that makes sense. If the underlying framework feels familiar, there's less that feels completely, alien.
Exactly.
The source then talks about related languages, explaining that because they maybe share a common linguistic ancestor.
Like a family tree of languages?
Yeah, they have similar features, which means fewer totally new concepts to learn. It gives a helpful example, actually.
Which one?
It notes that for English speakers, languages like Spanish, French, Italian, they tend to be easier to pick up compared to, say, Chinese, Japanese, or Korean.
Right. Because of that shared history, that linguistic closeness. Romance languages versus East Asian languages, for instance. Very different structures.
That difference, the sort of linguistic distance you mentioned, that's crucial then.
It really is. It refers to how different two languages are in their core aspects: grammar, vocabulary, sound systems. Languages in the same family just share more of those basic building blocks.
And pronunciation. That plays a big role too, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Huge.
The source highlights that if the sounds in the new language are pretty similar to sounds you already use in your native language, it's going to be a smoother ride.
Definitely.
Trying to master sounds that just don't exist in English, for example, that can be a real hurdle.
It really can. First, your ear needs training just to hear the difference, let alone trying to actually produce the sound correctly.
Like tones.
Exactly. Think about tonal languages like Mandarin or Vietnamese, where the pitch of a syllable changes the word's meaning entirely.
Right.
That's a concept that English speakers often find quite challenging initially because we don't really use tone in the same way.
Okay, so we've looked at the why learn and the what makes it potentially tough. Now, what are the absolute must-knows before someone even, takes that first step?
Crucial considerations.
Yeah, the source lays out some really important points here.
Indeed. And having realistic expectations, understanding what's actually required, that's so important for avoiding discouragement later on.
So what's number one?
Well, the first thing the source really emphasizes is commitment. Simple as that.
Okay, commitment.
This isn't, a weekend project. It demands time, patience, discipline, perseverance, and a pretty significant investment of effort.
Over time.
Oh, yeah. Likely over months, maybe even years.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely a marathon, not a sprint.
It really is. And linked very closely to that commitment thing is motivation.
Absolutely key.
The source stresses that having a strong personal reason for learning your why is just vital for keeping going. When things get tough, and they probably will.
They inevitably do.
That why is what stops you from, throwing in the towel. It's like having that clear destination in mind when you're on a really long hike.
That intrinsic motivation, it's like your internal compass, isn't it?
Yeah.
It guides you through the challenges, the plateaus that everyone hits in language learning.
Yeah, the plateaus are real. Then we get into the nuts and bolts, like vocabulary.
Now you have the words.
Exactly. The source says you need to be prepared to learn new words basically every day. And not just learn them, but actively use them. Put them in sentences to really make them stick.
That active use is critical. Just passively seeing a word on a list isn't nearly as effective.
Why is that?
Well, active recall, trying to pull the word from your memory and using it in context,
Yeah.
that builds much stronger neural connections. It's far more effective than just, reading it over and over.
Okay, active recall. Got it. The source also touches on different ways to learn, right? Like self-study versus getting an instructor.
Yeah, different approaches work for different people.
But it seems like, regardless of the method you choose, the common denominator is daily practice.
Yeah.
It underscores that necessity.
Absolutely. Consistency seems to be the magic ingredient.
Makes sense.
That consistent, even if it's just brief daily engagement, is usually more effective than, say, one long marathon session once a week. It lets your brain kind of gradually absorb and process everything.
And this next point, I think this is so important and maybe easily overlooked. Revision. Reviewing stuff.
Oh, hugely important. Don't just learn and forget.
Right. The source emphasizes you need to regularly review the material you've already learned, grammar rules, sentence structures, vocabulary, before you jump into new concepts.
Yes. Build on a solid foundation.
It argues this is crucial for mastering things faster and more efficiently in the long run, like reinforcing the foundations of a building before you add the next floor.
It's based on solid learning principles. Things like spaced repetition, revisiting material at increasing intervals. That's a highly effective technique for moving information from short-term to long-term memory.
So it stops the learning from just fading away.
Precisely.
And finally, the source just reminds us about the incredible amount of online resources available now.
Which is amazing, really.
It really is. We have so many tools, apps, websites, communities, things that just weren't available even like a couple of decades ago.
Yeah, these resources offer such variety of different learning styles, endless practice opportunities, even access to native speakers sometimes through exchanges. It can significantly boost the whole learning experience.
Yeah, actually lowers the barrier to entry in some ways.
It can, yeah.
So, okay, as we wrap up this deep dive into language learning for dummies, we've covered a lot of ground, haven't we?
We certainly have.
We've explored those really compelling reasons why, from broader global connections to those significant cognitive boosts, maybe even career advantages.
The motivations.
Then we acknowledge the challenges, right? Recognizing how your own native language kind of shapes the learning curve.
The difficulty factors. Yeah.
And we've highlighted that crucial groundwork, the absolute need for commitment and motivation.
Can't overstate those.
The ongoing work of building vocabulary, practicing consistently, that often forgotten importance of revision.
Crucial for retention.
And just knowing about the vast array of support out there. Ultimately, it seems pretty clear that no matter which path you choose, dedication, hard work, that's the key.
That's an excellent summary. The source gives a very, I think, accessible and encouraging overview for anyone who's thinking about learning a new language.
Okay, and that brings me to a final thought for you, our listener. Considering all those fascinating cognitive benefits we talked about, how the active engagement with a whole new linguistic system actually, rewires your brain a bit, how might that process unexpectedly deepen your understanding of your own native language and maybe your own culture?
Interesting angle.
Yeah, what new perspectives on your own linguistic and cultural norms might get unlocked just by grappling with a different one, something beyond just, simple communication?
That's a really intriguing question to ponder.
Definitely something to think about. Thanks for diving deep with us.